Welcome to this podcast. Thank you for joining me tonight, Meryl, Al, and Florence. And we have been on the behind the scenes of the Undivided Conference, which was a conference specifically available to those who are single at our church. I know for us that season has ended. But we attended because we were given the opportunity to serve at the conference, and I wanted to talk about those opportunities that you guys were given and how the conference was for you in the specific roles that you had. So let's start off by just generally talking about how the conference was for you, and anyone can start. What did you think of it? What did you think of the conference?
I thought it was really good. I felt like Al and Tiff were working really hard all the time. But I felt like everything went really smooth, and I was surprised by how many different people were there. Like not like a really wide age range, I guess.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I hope like people were well served.
Mm.
I didn't attend the Saturday part because we had to do a lot of stuff with, home stuff and everything. So I didn't get to sit in on any of the large group sessions, unfortunately. But I did ask a lot of people how it went, and I know that even just the vibe of being there on the second day was really cool. Like it was cool to see a lot of different people, singles of varying stages, right? Whether it's someone who's like a high school student or a college student to people who are more like young adult, well into their adulthood. Being there, it was cool to see them come together.
Mm.
Yeah, I thought it went really well too. From an admin standpoint, I should also open by saying I didn't actually get to attend any of the sessions beyond just dropping in for a few minutes, here and there to like take pictures and just pop in. But I think from the people that I talked to, they liked getting to connect with married couples and like older people at the church who they don't usually get to talk to. Like for the sessions and the topics that were covered, there's infinite material out there, like there's Desiring God and, all these resources and podcasts. But I think that the nice part is hearing from older men and women, like from your own church. And so I know that there was like a testimony sharing from one of the older singles in our church, and I heard that people really appreciated that one. And just in the times when I was able to drop in, like people just seemed really engaged in the sessions, and they were taking part and like having fun. Like I went into the Hope Center, and like there were two sessions right next to each other, and like literally they were taking turns just like erupting in laughter. It was just like so fun. Like so I mean, in that sense, I think I got a really good vibe from it, and just the feedback that I heard, people appreciated it. So I'm really glad that Gabe kind of moved forward with that vision. Because I think connecting the singles with the families at FCBC was a big part of that vision. So,
I don't know if it was Gabe or the admin team tried to incorporate elements to get it really exciting. I liked that there were like visuals of like the balloon decorations and all the little components of a conference, like name tags. And I heard, Al, that you were the one that went behind like getting special speaker name tags and stuff like that, little details like that. And did you guys know that like at the beginning of the session, like Gabe was also the MC, and he did like a book raffle?
Oh yeah, that was
That
cool.
Yeah, that was really cool. He put like the 50, 60 names on, and then like it was really exciting to see which name it landed on. So altogether, I thought it was a good turnout, but more importantly, I thought it was a blessing to see the married couples and the adults at our church step up to serve in the various capacities that there were service opportunities for. Okay, so the next question is, how did you find your role in this conference to be fulfilling of how God was able to use you for this specific purpose? You can either talk about, well, actually, yeah, just talk about how you served and how that was for you. And I guess we'll start with Al, since you're on the admin team. It'll be nice to hear from you first.
So for the admin group, I guess how it started was that Gabe reached out to some of us and said that he was planning this. And without knowing too much about it at that point, I was excited that there was going to be an event like this that's focused on serving the singles. Like I felt like it was really needed. And like you said, Les, at our church, we depend on singles and young adults a lot, like especially in the areas where my family benefits. So, yeah, it was just nice to give back to them in that way. But I guess my specific involvement, or like how I saw my goal, was just to support logistically in any way needed so that Gabe and the other speakers could be more free from any kind of admin burden and focus more on the ministering and the mentoring aspects and use their teaching gifts to benefit the attendees. Yeah, I think like ultimately it's, it's going to be the truths of God's word that are being taught that are really going to change people. So in that sense, I just really wanted to support and be part of that plan. And then I guess like just as another side to it, I think like in church, marriage is very like celebrated and at times elevated. So I don't think, we're not lacking in that area at all. And I think I just remember my season of singleness, like, marriage is the ultimate representation of Christ and the church. And, it's two people giving selflessly to each other, partners in sanctification, go forth, multiply, like, whatnot. So yeah, I mean, not to diminish any of that, but I remember just thinking like, oh, like that's really good, but I just don't really know what to do with that right now as a single. So I think that leads to the false feeling that the only meaning in life is to get married, and discontent is generated there. So I think, for me, like I remember that being a gap. And I know that I just would have benefited a lot from a conference like that. So yeah, just so for our attendees, I think we ended up having 72 people register in the end.
Wow.
It was open to anyone, but we defined singles as anyone who isn't married, so single, dating, engaged, or divorced. And I think half of those people were 25 and older, and then like a third was in that, I guess you could call it like post-grad or college age range. And then everyone else was younger than 18. So I think, in that group, there were people who are probably anxious to be dating or married, or like weighed down in a way by discontentment in their singleness. So yeah, I think I felt like, that hopefully the conference as a whole would help provide encouragement and contentment in all seasons of life. So yeah.
That's good. Well, we'll come back and talk about contentment, I'm sure, a little later. So yeah, Al, we're very thankful for what you did behind the scenes, all that work and preparation to organize this conference was really like the foundation for why like it could even happen. So yeah, I was really thankful. I was joyfully um seeing the fruits of your labor. So yeah.
Yeah, it
Thank-
was super fun. Like, I think when we first put out the call for volunteers and attendees, like at the same time, I think in the first month, like the ratio was like 1 to 1. Like, we had more volunteers than attendees. Like, it was crazy. People just really wanted to serve in this area. And, we were so thankful. And, like, we're joking, like, everyone can have their own personal concierge. So, yeah, God provided a lot.
Okay, so here's a follow-up question for you. Were there any aspects of your responsibilities where like you had to practice faith to see something come through?
Mm, yeah. Um, I think planning a conference is like the closest thing I could get to is like planning my wedding, maybe like
Yeah.
just needing to provide food for that many people and like, like seating and like all that stuff, like name tags even. Um, but I think what's different is that usually when you're planning something, like you have a fixed budget, like how much you're willing to spend.
Mm,
I think with a conference, you're depending on the program income to pay for, the things
mhm,
that you're trying to arrange ahead of time, like the
mhm,
catering. So, on one hand, I'm like, yeah, like we should really try to get attendee registration up because we have to pay for the food and, we have to feed all the volunteers too. But yeah, I think I was just really like it was so reassuring that there were so many people who just wanted to like come together and just put forth their time and energy. Um, and I think I just took a cue from Gabe. Like he did not seem flustered by it. Like there were a lot of last minute signups, but I think he kind of expected that. So yeah, we sort of just tried to work within the constraints of what we like thought would happen. Um, and it actually turned out like it was good. We were on budget for the most part.
Thanks. Thanks for giving that report. That's awesome to hear. Okay, let's see. Okay, so Meryl and Flo, you guys served with your husbands as the breakout speakers for the workshop that you held. So, I guess one of you guys can start and share like how did you guys finalize the topic and how was it serving as a breakout session workshop leader with your husband?
You want to go, Flo?
Okay, I'll go. So yeah, so Gabe emailed us as well as other couples if we'd be willing to lead a breakout session and that we could choose a topic. And um, immediately, like the thing I thought of was I knew what I would want us to talk about. It's basically just some of the challenges that Preston and I went through when we were a dating couple because they were pretty big obstacles in my opinion. I felt like it was the most like one of the most stressful times of my life, going through some of the challenges we went through. And I knew that I wanted us to be able to talk about that because I knew that people have gone through similar things or possibly will go through similar things. And so I just wanted to share that and hope that it could be encouraging to others. I've had like other situations. Well, I'll just share what they were for us to provide some context. So the three biggest challenges that Preston and I had while we were dating were number one, our age difference, because I'm 3 years older than Preston. Number two was long distance that we had to do while I was in med school for about 3.5 years. And then number three, the most stressful one was parental opposition, so my parents' opposition to our relationship. And over the years, like I've met, it not necessarily in church, but just I've met people in my life that have gone through stories where they were like talking about how, oh yeah, I'm dating someone, but it's not going to go anywhere because my parents are just so against them. And then I shared my story and they were just like, whoa, you know, and then I felt like that encouraged them and that really helped them to hang on. And a lot of these people, it's two I can think of in particular, they ended up marrying those significant others. So that was just encouraging. So that was my thought. And, you know, going through everything we went through while we were dating, I mean, I could only, at the end of it, when we were on our marriage, you know, ceremony and just reminding ourselves of how faithful how God has been to our relationship. And just wanted to use that as a testimony to share to others.
How do you think the session went?
And I think it went pretty well. Yeah, so I had to work with Preston on it, and it's funny because, like, you know, I did not want to procrastinate at all because we had a lot of other things going on around the same time. But you know, we kept trying to, like, we worked on a Google Doc together separately on like how we would approach it and things we learned from each challenge. But it ended up being like, I mean, he's been busy with a lot of stuff, work, and so like I would just write everything out from my perspective, and then I think it was like a few nights before we you know, gonna have to do the talk, we just like kind of like we worked on our own separate things but on the same Google Doc, and we were just talking through how we would do it. And I think the session went pretty well. At first I was like, do we have enough stuff to like talk for an hour and a half? But it actually went to that time, including the Q&A. And yeah, I thought there were some good questions asked. There were some good, you know, things brought up. So hopefully people were blessed by it. Hopefully people could be encouraged by it. I know for sure myself, like, you know, I wish I knew someone that was going through what I was going through at the time, because it was so tough. I felt so isolated from my family. Like I had mentioned in my session, I had like two worlds that I lived in during that time. I had a world that included Preston and then our church family, and I had a world that was like my family, and each world existed so well independent of each other. And I could never imagine these two worlds coming together and existing together. So yeah, it was just very, very stressful, very like heart-wrenching, you know, thinking about like maybe my family wouldn't be at my wedding. You know, those are thoughts that went through my head, and how God like softened my parents' heart and led us through that challenge was like so amazing, you know, like to see how our family is now and compared to how it was before. It's just truly like, you know, God is so good to us. You know, God has really just worked in our lives.
Well, I'm glad that you guys, I mean, the topic was very fitting for what you guys have gone through. And I think that opening up the conversation and just putting yourself out there is a really big encouragement. Even if someone doesn't have that experience, I would have wanted to sit in if I could have, just to hear like the inner working of like God through your journey together. But I did hear some feedback. I think some people, I mean, not some, at least one person told me it was really encouraging to hear that you would have never imagined that you guys went through something like that, you know, in your dating season. So I do think it's a very helpful topic to open up and have a discussion about.
And I was gonna say that like I really liked the intergenerational aspect of this, because it's been a while since I've worked with like youth, like I, you know, like back in my single days, I used to, and it was cool to be able to connect with and talk with some of those in the younger generation. And also I think about like how much I love hearing stories about some of the generations before us, like some of the things that they've gone through. And I'm sure they've gone through things too that we just don't know about. We see them now as like they have their kids or they have their grown kids and they're serving in church, but I'm sure there are a lot of stories and lessons and testimonies of what they've gone through, which I would love to hear someday, you know? So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
cool to be able to hear what the people have gone through.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that you guys did it. Praise God. All right. So Meryl, tell us about you and Hanley, or Pastor Hanley. Can we call him
Yeah,
Hanley?
you can call him Hallie.
Okay.
Well, for us, the way we chose our topic was that out of the list of topics that gave us, Hallie picked one, and I said no because I thought it was really boring. It was like how should you deal with theological differences as like a couple or something like that? Something that's totally like that would be really easy for him that he could do in his sleep. I was like, no, I don't have anything to say about that. I'm not interested. And then he picked another one. I forgot which one it was, but pretty much along the same lines. And I said no. And then he's like, okay, you just pick what you want then. So ours ended up being if friendships between guys and girls can exist, which someone ended up putting the catchphrase platonic relationships real or not, which made it sound really like it made me feel more like, oh shoot, this is like a hardcore topic. So Hallie was just really busy during this time, so he didn't have a lot of time to prepare. So I had to do a lot of like reading and sort of just gathering information. And so we did the same thing where I just like put it all in a Google Doc and I was like, well, you just read it when you have time and then you can like add your thoughts or whatever. So in our session, I guess the big catchphrase ended up being John Cito's line, clarity over confusion. That was said like so many times.
Nice.
And I think like Flo, I was like thinking, oh my gosh, I really haven't been in this situation for a long time where you're talking to singles who are like in this stage of life. You know, like when I was like a unicoy counselor or whatever, of course they would always be like, "Oh, what's your dating story?" And they would have all these questions and you would just like, you know, tell them what you were going through. But yeah, it just felt sort of like a blast from the past to be in that position again. Like they kept asking us like our dating story, and I was like, that's not what we're talking about right now. But I guess they were just really curious. So it was fun, I would say. I also, when everyone is sharing, I just want to really thank like all the childcare workers because I feel like they were so instrumental in any of us being able to serve there because that's like a huge barrier and just I don't know how they watched so many kids for so many hours, and it was raining, so they couldn't like bring the kids outside and stuff. So oh man, mad props to them. And my kids had a lot of fun, so I don't know what they did, but they did a really good job. Um, but yeah, it was just good being in that mindset again and being able to just talk to people in different stages of life and to answer questions like, oh, I like this girl, like when should I talk to them? Or you know, like I haven't thought about stuff like that in so long. Like when should I DTR? I was like, this is like but it was fun. It was fun. Yeah. And I went to your session, Leslie and Darren, and even though like I know your guys' story and stuff, it was still fun sitting there listening to
Fun. You
yeah,
didn't look like you were having fun.
I had fun. It was good. It was fun listening to them recount their story and yeah, you still learn stuff. So yeah.
All right, let's close with one last question. This question is to share any exhortations or encouragement that you would like to offer the singles who are at our church. And this can include maybe lessons you've learned or maybe things you would have liked to know when you were a single. Or maybe it can be a perspective of how you perceive singlehood now that you are on the other side. So yeah, anyone can start.
the way I perceive singlehood now that I'm on the other side is freedom.
Freedom.
Yeah, just like you're so like your time is so free. I mean, like with every person you add to your family, like more and more time is just stripped away. And sometimes there's things that you want to do, right? Like the other day, I couldn't even read my book without having to stop every half a page to address another human being in my family who was trying to vie for my attention. Then I was like, why am I even reading this book? It's like a waste of time. Um, so it's just like, I don't know, there's just so much freedom to not only like do what you want to do, but you have so much freedom to like serve others. Like I miss Glennis's testimony because my son was sleeping. See, like there's no freedom there. I had to carry my son so he could sleep. So I asked her to send it to me, and I was reading it, and she was talking about how she, as a single person, had the freedom to just like go to people's houses and have dinner with them when they like on a whim would call her over because they wanted just some company, or like she has the freedom to spend like an hour before every meal just like reading the Bible and talking to God. And I'm like,
Mm.
dude, I have never done that ever since I've had children, like it's unheard of. um so there's difficulties in being single, but there's also just like so much blessing that
Mhm.
I don't know. And she's like talking about how she's able to like go on weekly dates with people who were curious about the gospel because she
Mhm.
was free, and how she could just move from country to country,
Mhm.
and how God is like her greatest confidant, and how
Mhm.
he will never leave, and he is always there, and he is always faithful, and he is um yeah, that's just like something when I was reading it, I just really felt convicted by. Like, man, that's so sweet, to have God be so close to your heart because you spend so much time with him and you're not distracted by the things of this world.
Yeah, that's so true. You know what's interesting though is like I think we would probably say the same thing when we were single, that we were really busy, but we just had no idea how much busier life will be when you're tied down to like a commitment for serving like your spouse and then children if God gives you children. Like you don't have that reference point. You just think, oh, I'm really busy. But I think when you come onto this side, where you have a commitment to raise like a family, to support a spouse, and then to raise your kids, then you're busy, and but you actually have to start eliminating things in your life, which you don't really have to do when you're still single.
So I would say like I think I think much like other people, when I was in high school, college, and adult before I got married, I would always see marriage as like the goal, right? It was like the Mecca, like just get to, marriage and everything will be great. And while marriage is wonderful and there's many blessings and I love my kids so much, like I can't imagine life without them now. Um, I think that, man, like now I look back and I'm like, man, I should have like embraced it more. I should have like done more. And I think God knew that side of me. And that's I really do believe that God wanted to separate me and Preston for a little bit while we were dating. There were so many possibilities where I could have maybe gotten into a school in California. I almost got into one like super close to where he went to college. And I was so sure that God was going to make that happen, even to the last minute. But he didn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now that I look back on it, I'm like, wow, like God knew, right? He used that time when I was apart from Preston, um, from my aspect, it allowed me to really focus on my studies, number one, really invest and make new friendships, which I think at the time I was like, I don't need new friends. Like I have my old friends and they're great, right? And it really allowed me to kind of put my time into some of the on-campus ministries and like really just like do other things and grow and mature in that aspect. And I know that if I was here for school and yeah, I would focus on my studies, but I'm sure every other time I would be just wanting to hang out with Preston, always wanting to hang out with him. I'm sure I would be like that. So because of that forced time apart, it was almost like I was single, right? Because I just had a lot of time there and um, you know, Ohio like didn't have much to do and I didn't have as many friends. So I honestly there like whenever I went back there, I was like, oh, I have time to like think and like get things done. And I was actually really productive. Whereas when I was in, LA, like it was just always so busy, always something going on, which is good. But again, it's a lot of distractions, right? So, and then when you're married, it's even more distractions, right? Like everything going, you have to think about this other person. It's not just what I can't on a whim go meet a friend for dinner if I want to, or stay out late to have coffee because I have to think, well, is my husband okay with it? Or do my kids need me? Or I feel bad I'm putting too much like, responsibility on my husband to, put down the kids. So it is all these things you have to consider. Whereas when you're single, you have more of that freedom to invest in relationships, to invest in serving. Just recently, they've been talking about the summer short-term missions, and I'm like, man, I want to go on with them, And I'm like, I don't think I'll be able to go for the longest time because it's 2 weeks commitment, and that's 2 weeks away from my kids, unless I go to one where my kids are able to come, which most of them, they're too young right now, right? So I think that, I wish, I think I utilized a lot of the time, but I think I could have done more. And I think, that looking back on it now, it's like, it's such a great time, to really devote, and mature and grow. But I get where you're coming from, Leslie. Like, it's just, you don't realize it till you're already on, it's like too late, because you don't have a fear. You're just like, well, I'm like, I want to date someone. I want to be married, which is reasonable, right? But I think just embracing the time that you're in now, and accepting and being in the present, I think, because I was always like future, look forward to the next big thing. But I think embracing the present is really important.
Yeah. Anything else?
I think for exhortation to singles, I think I would just say like your value isn't based on your relationship status at all. And for anyone who needs to hear it, like you have inherent worth because you're loved by Christ. And I think especially if maybe you're not in or if you're in your season of singleness and not by choice, sometimes God just doesn't give us the circumstances or the desire maybe to be married earlier in life, because he wants us to be closer to him, or because we have other good works that he wants us to focus on that would be more difficult as a married person, as you guys alluded to. So I think I would just say, just trust God with the uncertainty in the future, and like try to find your peace and your happiness in him, and like cultivate your relationship with him and pray about it every day. And I think just like practically like focus on being a good friend. I think like if you end up getting married, like the person that you marry has to be your best friend, or by the time you're married, like they should be your best friend. And I think, for Edwin and me, like we were lucky to, and I think back to when we were friends, and it wasn't like we singled each other out and we're like, oh, we're best friends, or like, oh, he's like my guy best friend. Like it wasn't even like that. It was just like a long time of just being good, solid friends. Like we were part of the same solid friend group for a really long time. And like there's just trust that's built up over the years. And we already like had that relationship. So I think when we first started dating, it was like we like skipped ahead like 20 dates. Like we already were like, you know, like at that point in trusting each other. So yeah, I think just friendship is so important and you never stop working on that part, like even when you're married. So I think, you know, as a single, you just focus on being a good friend and just cultivating your relationship with Christ.
Very good, very good. So you're agreeing with the workshop that there is such a thing as platonic friendship.
There has to be. Otherwise, like,
Yeah.
if there wasn't, then we wouldn't be friends.
Yeah. My exhortation is for people, for those who have a desire to get married. This exhortation is for people who have the desire to one day get married, is that your identity is not going to be found through the marriage, and the marriage is not going to fix any of the problems that you might have right now, whether it's loneliness or maybe it could be like running away from problems that you see in your own family. So all that like healing can only come through like Christ, and your husband definitely is not going to be that person. And because I am like a full-time stay-at-home, I spend most of my time literally just doing chores and feeding my family. So my exhortation is not because I see women like this, but someone has to be the house manager and someone has to be the servant in the house. And I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. Like the chores just have to get done. The mouths have to be fed. And I think a lot of times God will use the mom and the dad. But I mean, speaking as a woman, like this is like a big part of like where my time goes, and I struggle with it sometimes because I don't feel like doing it, but it still has to be done. And I think in the beginning of marriage I was struggling with even something as small as like fairness, and growing in the ability to boast and outdoing like my husband, like, oh, I get to do this chore, like so that Darren doesn't have to do it. I think it's something that I've personally, it's been a long journey for me to learn how to be humble and loving my family in these practical ways. Like just somebody has to be the house manager, and I'm still working on that. And I think my exhortation to men who want to have the desire to get married, I think my greatest exhortation would just be to love the church, because the role of the husband in the marriage kind of reflects the role of like Christ to the bride, to the church. And I think the specific actions I think of is loving the church by serving the church and learning how to be a good leader, because being a servant leader as a husband, I think is what like what the woman needs in a husband, someone who would love her as a servant, but also as a leader. And I think the best way to practice that is through the church, learning how to just love well and being committed and loving even when people are hard to love. I think that would be such great practice for marriage, because I think after you get married, you don't realize how complicated and mysterious women can be. So let's see. I think that's my exhortation to people who have the desire. Let's see. Anything else you guys want to share to singles or about the conference?
I had like just a thought that I wanted to talk about, but I didn't, I forgot to bring it up
Oh
earlier.
yeah, sure.
Oh yeah, I was just thinking that like in the course of planning the conference and like executing certain parts of it, it just opened my eyes to like the collective effort that it takes to not just produce a one-off event, but just like keep up, I don't know how to say it, like the infrastructure of the church. Like it just takes like the entire body. And it's, just things that you take as a given when someone else is like in charge or like responsible for it. So, yeah, I mean, like even like an isolated task like food and kitchen, like we didn't even cook the meals, like we catered it, but it just took so much coordination, and there's so much protocol and like just historical knowledge, like of using it, since it's like a shared functional space. So I think there's just a lot to be like passed down. And I think on that, I think there's something to be said about like there's so many like faithful adults at this point, like serving just year after year, and like their love for their church. And I think that that just really speaks to God's grace in providing and sustaining us. So yeah, it was one last thought that I had just about the conference and my reflection. So
Thanks for sharing that. I think that it really points to God's grace in seeing that this church is a multi-generational church. And I think like if you think about like this age group, I think that this age group tends to flock to churches that are just like single specific or like just a certain age demographics. And I find that it's really rare to be able to have the intergenerational aspect that this church has, and it does speak to the faithfulness of the older generation that has committed themselves for decades. And it's something that I don't think we should take lightly. Like it's definitely a true gift of like God's grace to this church. So thanks for sharing that. Thanks for joining me tonight. And we'll just end here. Okay, bye.
Bye. Thank you.